With the Iran war heating up, the Strait of Hormuz still closed, gas prices expected to skyrocket, the U.S. will not tolerate the Iranian government or military shutting down 20% of U.S. oil and natural gas trade. This means it's likely going to get much, much more hot. But the question on everyone's mind is, are we in World War III now that we've got the Gulf in chaos, already the war with Russia and Ukraine, Venezuela? People are waiting with bated breath to see, will China make a move on Taiwan? Will that be the moment by which we are officially in World War III? Or, my friends, as many world leaders have already stated, is World War III now? Well, one of the most interesting stories I've seen in a minute is that there is a guy who builds nuclear bunkers to survive the apocalypse, who said he's got two high-level Trump cabinet members who are asking him, when is my bunker going to be ready? Now, me, myself, my friends, I actually have a stake in a survival camp. I don't know if the right way to describe it is. But there is a company called Fortitude Ranch, for which I am a small investor. And my understanding is that many of the people who seek out emergency survival shelters work in military and intelligence. And it's probably because, well, to a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Maybe we don't need to be so freaked out, but when you are on the front lines of this, in terms of the news and information, the literal war, you're probably thinking, could happen at any moment. And so when you have Trump cabinet members contacting this guy saying, when is my bunker going to be ready? You have to wonder about the conversations that are happening behind the scenes in the Trump administration. Fears of potential retaliation. Maybe China enters the war formally, and then, oh boy, and then it is World War III. But there's more to this. Recently, Carolyn Leavitt was asked about the potential for a military draft and whether or not that was on or off the table, to which Carolyn Leavitt said this president won't take anything off the table. Now, of course, my friends, this may just be typical Donald Trump administration kind of rhetoric. You will not get me to say something we don't know. We're not going to say anything. Trump has talked about it before. You come to me and ask me my strategies and plans. I'm going to tell you, no, I'm not playing that. We got any option that we need. The argument being that if Iran, China, Russia, or anyone else hears Trump says we will not draft, they may think we can apply that leverage. That means they won't have the manpower. Does this mean Trump will actually draft anybody? Probably not. That being said, people are freaking out now because you've got talk of potentially drafting young Americans. And let's just be real. You're not going to get anybody in Gen Z to be effectively drafted. Sorry. These are the ends of the glory days, my friends, because you're either going to have some fat, lefty, progressive, short Weasley guy, or you're going to have some anti-Israel, right-wing Gen Z guy, and neither of which are going to be effective draftees for your war. But it is interesting to see this conversation and this rhetoric nonetheless. So let us, my friends, dive into what is going on, the question of World War III, the responses to the threat of the draft, and, my friends, an omen. That's right. Strange sea beasts have washed up on the shores of Mexico, indicating a dark time is to come. It's the doomsday fish, I guess. And then, let's just be real. Civil war, of course, has never left the table, and there are deep concerns about what just happened over the weekend with this Islamic terror attack. While we're talking about foreign conflict and war, reports are emerging now that Iran is activating sleeper cells. And so we have already just seen in the past week several Islamic terror attacks. A couple here in the United States. So it is getting scary, my friends, but let's jump to the news. Before we do, you got to go to castbrew.com and pick up some delicious Cast Brew coffee. Appalachian Nights, everybody's favorite. But don't forget, we also have got Mary's Ghost Blend. We've got Golden Hour, Birthday Blend. We got a bunch of flavored coffees, a bunch of different blends of coffees, and more importantly, pool water by the aluminum bottle. And I'm going to tell you this, these aluminum bottles, we are assured by the manufacturer, no plastic liner. Indeed, no plastic liner in these in these aluminum bottles. We also have the Cast Brew Vault Black. So pick up your Cast Brew Coffee, support the show. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel right now. Smash the like button and share the video everywhere. Just last week, you guys did. And I've said this before, if you really do like the work that I do, if you think these videos are important, these breakdowns, take the URL, post it everywhere. We got over 800,000 views on last week's video, thanks to you guys sharing and caring. Here's a story from the Telegraph. World War III bunker manufacturer, I'm inundated with calls. As war rages in Iran, Ron Hubbard is fielding inquiries from politicians and billionaires, including 2 members of Trump's cabinet. I'm going to stress this again as we read the story. You have to imagine the kind of conversation happening behind the scenes with Trump's cabinet for a couple of them to go to this guy and say, hey, I think we need some emergency underground nuclear bunkers. I'd ask him, well, I'm sure Ron says, no questions asked, we're going to build them. Me personally, I'd kind of want to ask them, what makes you think you need it? Additionally, who are these individuals who can afford it? War for most people brings confusion, fear, and destruction. But for Ron Hubbard, it brings something else altogether, opportunity. The 63-year-old Texan builds bunkers designed to help customers survive drone attacks, ballistic missile strikes, or even nuclear Armageddon. With the U.S. war with Iran sparking fears of World War III, business has never been better for Atlas. Quote, I've been inundated with calls, says Hubbard. Inquiries have gone up tenfold since the war broke out last Saturday. Hubbard claims 2 senior cabinet members in the Trump administration are amongst his clients. One of them texted me yesterday asking me, when will my bunker be ready? Now, this company's really cool, I want to stress. What they do is they build the bunkers out and then they sell them. So what you do is, if you were to buy one of these bunkers, they got different sizes. It's a cool company, by the way. I think it's fun. They dig a hole, planning for like the certain specs to whichever bunker you bought. Then they come in and they drop them in and they're pre-built, ready to go. How cool is that? With somewhat remarkable timing, Hubbard's firm opened new offices in Dubai at the end of February. Just 2 days later, Iranian missiles rained down on the glitzy city as the Islamic Republic took revenge on the Gulf states for their support for the bombing campaign launched by the United States and Israel. The onslaught shattered the city's carefully cultivated image as a safe paradise for wealthy expats, protected from the instability of the surrounding region. The Texan says 2 of the city's billionaires immediately got in touch to buy a shelter. I wouldn't call it lucky, but I would call it good timing for them, he says, insisting his motivation is to protect people, not profit. Now, hold on there a gosh darn minute, Mr. Hubbard. I think you should profit. Let's not make profit a dirty word. Profit means that you will be rewarded. That's all it means. Now, to these lefties, the word profit means undue resources accumulated through exploitation, which is nonsense. If it costs me $10 to put a sandwich together, and you pay me $20 for that sandwich, the $10 is not so that I can dance on my table and scream that I'm rich. It's so that I can pay my bills and buy a house and take care of my family. You, sir, making shelters deserve to be rewarded for the labor that you are doing. I think it's perfectly fine to say, I profit from protecting people. Hubbard's company constructs hundreds of bunkers a year in its factory in Sulphur Springs, Texas. They range from vast, sprawling underground compounds worth more than $5 million down to small precast bolt holes for those wishing to ride out doomsday in a budget-friendly $20,000 alternative. Hey, that's not too expensive. Maybe I should get one. With an aesthetic combining a submarine and a Bond villain lair, the shelters can come with cinemas, swimming pools, an armory, and fully equipped gun range inside. Holy crap! We've actually covered this company quite a bit over the past couple of years, considering everybody's on the verge of losing their minds. Atlas also saw a large spike in sales after Russia invaded Ukraine, probably why we covered it. But the Iran war has hit home. I have friends and business partners in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and so many Americans go there. They thought they'd never see bombs fall, but now they're getting the ish bombed out of them. Atlas has averaged $2 million a month in bunker sales this year, but Hubbard predicts this could rise to $50 million in the next month. Bunker building is like being a farmer. When it's time for harvest, you have to reap all you can. The Texan insists he is not the type who hopes for war, but admits, from my point of view, I don't have to advertise very much at the moment. Now that they've been bombed, they're all going to want shelters. It's just a fact of life. Indeed, people in Israel, for instance, have bomb shelters all over the place. But he is not paralyzed by the prospect of the oncoming apocalypse. God has me here for a reason, he says. I'm a Christian and I believe in the Bible, and I believe that there will be that great war. I don't think we're that far from it. Honestly, it seems like the end times are very close. But the question, my friends, is, are they actual close? Now, check this out. This is an image of the inside of their bunkers. Hey, look at that. It looks really, really comfortable and nice, like a little apartment. I don't like the low ceilings, but hey, you get what you get when you're trying to dodge nuclear apocalypse. From NJ.com, they write, we're already in World War III and Trump doesn't care about our lives. Okay, I mean, look, if you want to write about us being in World War III, fine. But to make it partisan is going to make it less effective. Question, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio publicly suggested that Israel's actions towards Iran effectively forced the U.S. into striking first. A rare acknowledgement from a Trump official that Israeli decisions were driving American military involvement. U.S. officials later pushed back, insisting Trump order the strikes because Iran was backsliding on nuclear negotiations and rapidly expanding its missile capabilities. What do you make of Rubio essentially saying the quiet part out loud? In response, this is, I'm not sure I get the name of the guy here. This is Mike Duhame, a Republican, giving his response. He says, Rubio has been in a tough spot as Secretary of State. He has a long history of strong foreign policy positions on his own, but now his job is to promote the president's foreign policy, which doesn't always match his own. It's not easy, but when you have been a prominent politician for decades, to put yourself in a position essentially being a high-level staff person, not a principal yourself anymore, that was not an answer. What I will say is this, before I get to the Democrats' response, and then we've got another article, of course. Rubio admitted it, and many people are desperately trying to walk it back. I'm not playing these games. Rubio said that they got word Israel was going to engage in some kind of action. And if Israel did, Iran would then strike U.S. targets in retaliation. That would be unacceptable. So they decided they would go in with Israel and take out any capabilities that Iran had to strike U.S. targets. 7 U.S. servicemen and women have been killed thus far. Now, Rubio says if they did nothing and took a defensive posture and Americans died, they would be having hearing after hearing, questioning how they could have known it would happen and did not take the action. Thus, because Israel was prepared to move, the U.S. was stuck. Israel being our ally, the U.S. said, we have to go in. And you know what? I've heard a lot of people say, no, the U.S. wanted to do this anyway. No, spare me, dude. Spare me. Trump was trying to avoid this. Israel dragged us in. That's true. Now, the Democrat, Julie, says, I would rather focus on the fact that we're already in World War III, and no one is talking about it in that context. This conflict has rapidly expanded to involve over a dozen countries through direct military action, defensive interceptions, or retaliatory strikes. While the core offensive was launched by the United States and Israel, Iran has retaliated against regional neighbors, hosting U.S. assets or intercepting projectiles, including Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Oman. Furthermore, nations like Jordan, Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, Azerbaijan have seen their territories used as battlegrounds or targeted by strikes, while the spillover effects of hostilities have triggered military or humanitarian crises in neighboring Yemen, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. Meanwhile, Russia is now providing Iran with targeting intelligence on American military assets in the Middle East, including the locations of U.S. warships and aircraft, while Ukraine is providing the U.S. with assistance in helping to protect against Iranian drones. What does that sound like to you? And my friends, I agree with Julie Roginski, a Democrat. This sounds to me like World War III. Well, The Independent has chimed in. The world has turned into a real-life house of dynamite. Has World War III already started? The hit Netflix film imagined a world where the U.S. president was having to make terrifying choices as a ballistic missile hurtled toward America. As the world takes a step closer to a regional war turning into a global conflict, military history guy Walters explains why it's hard to ignore the comparisons between what happened in the last 7 days and 1914. Now, I just must step aside real quick to address the film House of Dynamite. Man, that movie sucked. Okay, in all seriousness, it was awesome for the first 20 minutes, and then the movie ends. And then it's basically the same movie 4 times, like every 20 minutes. Now, I mean, seriously, the movie is about a ballistic missile heading towards the U.S., and they can't stop it. And then right before you get that climax, that apex, it stops, starts over with a slightly different perspective. Same thing happening. And then right before that moment, stops, starts over with a slightly different, okay. I was like, like after the first 20 minutes, I just started skipping because it's the same movie over and over and over again. It's interesting though. What would happen in these 20 minutes when a nuclear warhead, probably a dozen, are headed towards, I think was it Chicago? I think they were targeting a big city. That metro's got like 9 million people. What would you do? The question is, what are the U.S.'s defenses against ballistic missile strikes? Now, many people believe it would never happen. There would be no strike on U.S. soil because it would take so long to do. We're going to knock that thing out of the sky by any means necessary. And we got warships. We got laser cannons. Have you guys seen the videos of the laser cannons we got? They fire an infrared laser. It superheats the object and then it blows up. I think the U.S. has probably got the capabilities to stop all of this. So, sleep easy, my friends. We have nothing to worry about. A nuclear missile will never reach these shores. I believe we're likely going to be safe. Except for, of course, the Iranian sleeper cells that are being activated outside the United States. We just had in New York 2 Islamic extremists lob explosives at protesters. The media lies to cover it up. Mamdani says Islamophobia is a problem. Islamic extremists threw IEDs at protesters. That's where we're at. We had the shooting in Austin. Several people outside of a bar. And this is likely all retaliation for the U.S. strike on Iran. So let's get back to reality. Now, I don't know if we can actually survive a nuclear strike. If a couple of warheads were actually launched in the United States, we'd like to believe that we've got surface-to-air defense capabilities, be it missiles, be it scrambling jets to shoot the rockets down. If they're going into space before coming down, we're in deep trouble. And the question then is, the technique we saw, let me put it like this. I believe it's called the Blue Sparrow Israeli rocket. It went forward and then straight up into space, over the Ayatollah's palace, and then straight down. How do you defend against something like that? That's the intention. So if we have an intercontinental ballistic missile in space, the questions are, will we be able to knock it down? And if they use a top-down strike, even if we can, will it just detonate over one of our cities? Now, again, we don't know. But we do have these bunkers popping up. The question is, beyond this, what about sleeper cells? Terror attacks in our cities. People who entered this country illegally and are now sitting, lying in wait for the word to engage in a terror strike. You know, the idea behind terrorism in this capacity, they want to shock the American public so that support for the war breaks. And then the question is, how does the U.S. keep fighting when the American people say enough? I will stress this as well. The inverse is also possible. So one of the reasons I think we may not see any massive serious attack is that it could effectively be a casus belli. If an Iranian detonates a bomb, killing hundreds of people, thousands or otherwise, the U.S. will use that as a cause for war to basically get boots on the ground in Iran. I'll put it like this. If an Iranian actually was responsible for the death of U.S. civilians in U.S. territory, you may actually get, not a guarantee, but you may get a lot of people, a lot of Americans saying outright, we want the war. And that's maybe why I am not so deeply concerned about a terror attack in the United States. To be fair, they've already happened. We get that. I'm saying larger scale and more frequently. We shall see. Now, my friends, where things are getting really spicy. Not my son over my dead body. MTG lays into Carolyn Leavitt for refusing to rule out Iran war draft. Indeed. Carolyn Leavitt was on Maria Bartiromo the other day and was asked about the potential for a military draft, to which she responded, Trump is not ruling anything out. Well, my friends, that is a very, very dangerous approach, I must say. Not ruling anything out. Telling people that there is a possibility that they will draft Americans. You want to lose the midterms, baby? Now, the truth is this. Guys, there's not going to be a draft. There will never be a draft. The only time you'd probably ever get legitimate conscription in the United States would be if like a bunch of Chinese boats rammed into California and then they started running through and it's like, okay, now we need people to fight back. The truth is, our government, our military figured out a long time ago that market economics is the easiest way to get a military. See, the thing is, when you draft people to make them fight a war they don't want, you get Vietnam. You get a bunch of young men who aim above the tree line and avoid shooting the bad guys because they didn't want to be there in the first place. Well, the solution? It has long been entertained that when the economy is bad, people enlist. It's a job. And if there's no jobs available, you got a job. And it's not a bad job, depending on what it is. That's how they play the game. You will get the people who will choose to go there, and then in their minds saying, I chose to be here, so I do not believe a draft is really going to be on the table. Butteromo says mothers out there are worried that we're going to have a draft, that we're going to see their sons and daughters get involved in this. Butteromo said, seeking assurances that nothing, and noting that this fight has solely consisted of an exchange of airstrikes so far. It has been and it will continue to be, the secretary answered. President Trump wisely does not remove options off of the table. I know a lot of politicians like to do that quickly, but the president, as commander-in-chief, wants to continue to assess the success of the military operation. It's not part of the current plan right now, but the president, again, wisely keeps his options on the table. The reality is, they're not calling for a draft. A draft is extremely unlikely. They're just not going to say, we will not do it, because then our enemies will be emboldened by it. Reacting to a clip, Marjorie Taylor Greene says, Carolyn Levitt doesn't rule out a draft. How about the answer is no draft and no boots on the ground because we campaigned on no more foreign wars or regime change. Liars. Every single one of them. Not my son over my dead body. In a follow-up post, the ex-congresswoman added, by the way, a bunch of psycho Republicans want to not only draft your sons, but your daughters too. Senator Lindsey Graham, Mark Levin, and Laura Loomer, and all the murderous, bloodthirsty maniacs that support this America Last War. In a third post, she wrote, they tried to add women to the draft to selective service multiple times while I was in Congress. Trump and Republicans need to guarantee that there will be no draft and never draft our daughters. In fact, my friends, Republicans opposed putting women in the draft, and Democrats were for it. Democrats were the feminists who said women can serve too. Since leaving office in January after falling out with Donald Trump last year, Greene has positioned herself as the true voice of the MAGA movement, etc. I mean, whatever you want to, the politics of MTG, I'm not super interested in. Just that her statement on this is interesting, and the question of the draft, indeed. My friends, Donald Trump is quite mad. He is angry that Israel destroyed Iranian oil fields, causing crude to surge. Trump wants those oil fields. Now they're blown up. Well, my friends, I ask other questions. Beyond this, as we talk about the potential for World War III, there is still a lingering question that exists in this country about a potential for civil war. I, of course, have been of the opinion for some time that there is a high likelihood of civil war in this country, though I don't know for sure. There's no guarantees. It's definitely a political civil war or a cold civil war. But we have this from Common Dreams. Trump is rage baiting the U.S. into a second civil war. In a healthy democracy, all sides generally recognize the legitimacy of the system itself, regardless of internal squabbles. In the U.S., this is no longer the case. And to Ramzi Baroud, who wrote this, I ask you to only look in the mirror. When they arrested Trump's lawyers, okay, this was well before Trump took his second term. You want to tell me about questioning the legitimacy? This is where we're at. And right now, they've been arguing that the election was stolen in 2024, and just, it's laughably absurd. The Democrats are now complaining that the election's rigged, and other elections are rigged. Yeah. Because neither side believes the other side is legitimate. Now, the big news from over the weekend was an Islamic terror attack in New York targeting a protest opposed to Islam. This was led by a man named Jake Lang. Now, whatever you think about this man and his opinions isn't the point. The point is Islamic jihadi extremists threw improvised explosive devices at the protesters. And the media has framed it over and over again as though what actually happened is that they threw explosives near Mamdani's house. Or that, let me put it like this. All of the stories are framed to make it sound like it was the victims who were in fact the perpetrators. What is Darvo? Deny something, reverse victim and offender? I don't know. The point is, you had protesters outside of Mamdani's house. Islamic extremists lobbed explosives. And then what did Mamdani say? He says a white supremacist, Jake Lang, protested. What happened next was worse. He said, it is political violence is wrong, and an explosive was thrown. To anybody who didn't know the news, it would sound like a white supremacist showed up and threw an explosive. NBC News wrote that suspicious devices were found near his home. Again, making it sound like Islam protesters showed up and planted devices. In fact, the truth is, protesters were marching peacefully, and then Islamic extremists threw explosive devices. Mamdani responded by condemning Islamophobia. This all ties together, my friends. So let me wrap it up with a neat little bow before we carry on. We have an internal conflict in this country where our media lies to us. They've lied to us for quite some time. That's pretty obvious. But they accuse Trump of rage baiting us into a second civil war, when in fact, my friends, it is the corporate establishment media that is doing that. It is Mayor Mamdani that is doing that. By all means, if you don't like Jake Lang, you can say, I do not respect the anti-Islam protests led by Jake Lang. It is hateful or otherwise. Have that opinion. And then you can say, however, Islamic extremists attacked these men, and that is evil. You're allowed to have opinions, but we have to agree on the facts. And where we're at right now is that Donald Trump won a popular vote. Part of his mandate was deportation of illegal immigrants. Zohran Mamdani explicitly campaigned on protecting illegal immigrants from the American voter. The American voter spoke. Trump listened. They voted this man in. They said deport illegal immigrants. And Mamdani said, we will protect the illegal immigrants from you, the American voter. That does not represent America. And so we have internal struggles right now. We fear terror strikes, and we have a complete political bifurcation. If World War III were to truly break out, our adversaries would start funding whichever side was willing to take the money and the weapons. And I'd imagine many of these progressives would take them in 2 seconds. So my friends, I'm going to wrap this one up. Smash the like button, share the show once again. If you've made it this far, you are a legend. Only around 30% of the viewers actually make it to the end of the video. It's actually pretty good. So if you have, my friends, I request that you take the URL to this video and you post it on all of your social media. Put in your X, your Facebook, Instagram, whatever it is you have. Blue Sky, if for some reason you have Blue Sky, because it really does help. You can follow me on X and Instagram at Timcast. We're back tonight at 8 p.m. for Timcast IRL with the great Brandon Herrera. It's going to be epic. Thank you all so much for hanging out, and we will see you all in the next. We'll see you all tonight for Timcast IRL. Stay safe out there.